Pick one small change that you would like to make in your choices as a consumer of textiles and try it out for a little bit. So maybe you go and get the pants that you love so much that are way too long and just get them hemmed so you'll actually wear them. Or maybe you take a moment to sew on a few loose buttons or mend a hole in your favorite pair of pants. And it could be terrible or it could be visible mending. But I think anything that I see that someone has attempted to try to fix is beautiful and interesting and awesome. A lot of people feel like they have to be perfectionists, and you really don't.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Vandal Theory, a podcast about science and research at University of Idaho. Our show shines light on groundbreaking research at U of I, work that has earned us the prestigious Carnegie R1 classification. Fewer than 4% of U.S. colleges and universities hold this top-tier research status, and U of I is the only one in Idaho. I am your host for the day. I'm Danae Lunds, the External Communications Coordinator at U of I, and I am joined by my co-host, Lee.
Hi, Danae. I'm Lee Cooper, science writer and editor here at University of Idaho.
So today we're going to talk about building a sustainable wardrobe. To kick us off, I have a question. I would like to know if you have ever fixed any clothing.
I have mostly patched pants that have gotten holes in it because they're expensive. And once you find one that fits, man, you want to hold on to it. So I've done a couple patches, hemmed a couple suit pant legs, that type of thing.
I really haven't done much. I have a tiny sewing kit that if it's like a rip on a seam or a button fell off, I can fix that. Beyond that, I really do not have the skill set to fix clothes, unfortunately.
Not a skill set we auto get anymore.
No, we don't prioritize it. But today, we're talking with someone who is going to give us some tips on how to get better at this kind of thing, both with fixing things and buying things that will last longer. Her name is Chelsey Byrd Lewallen, and she's a senior instructor in the Margaret Ritchie School of Family and Consumer Sciences at U of I. And she's also a sewist who's rethinking the way we wear, care for, and keep our clothes. In this episode, she's going to share how small choices can make a big impact on our closets, our wallets, and the planet. You ready to get into it?
I'm so ready.
Hi, Chelsey. Welcome to the Vandal Theory.
Thank you.
To get us started, can you just give us a brief introduction? Tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. I am a senior instructor in the Apparel, Textiles, and Design program in the Margaret Ritchie School of Family and Consumer Sciences at the University of Idaho. So basically, most of what you would need to understand of how to design and construct apparel, I teach. So that includes pattern making, intro to fashion and the apparel industry, textiles, multiple apparel construction classes, surface design, Adobe Illustrator for fashion design. It's a lot of classes. I'm also an alterations and repairs specialist and the co-founder and former owner of Altered Ego, which is a clothing alterations and repairs shop in downtown Moscow. And very recently, an author and illustrator to my first publication and book, which is called Clothing Alterations and Repairs, Maintaining a Sustainable Wardrobe.
Why did you decide to write this book?
So when I was going to college, my dad told me that I should really try to figure out what it is that I loved doing and then become really good at it and then find a way to make it something that people need. And nobody actually really needs more clothing. I mean, you do, but it's not hard to achieve that. And so I started doing clothing alterations and repairs out of my house after the birth of my first child. And that kind of sprung into a business. And I'm just really passionate about textile sustainability. And I've landed on this particular issue as my chosen metaphorical mountain to die on. The apparel industry and textile industry is estimated to produce over 92 million tons of waste a year and consumes over 79 trillion liters of water, which is just outrageous. And I really love our planet and the people and environment and resources on it. And I really desperately wanted to find a way or small ways that I can reduce that impact. So I fully understand that personally, I'm not likely going to be able to encourage policy changes and business practices tied with all of the stages of textile and apparel manufacturing, but I can teach people how to replace a zipper head or how to hem their pants and mend, darn, or patch something so what they already own has a chance to last a little longer. I also really noticed that there's a gap in the market for instructional texts that cover most common alterations and repairs that we would use in modern clothing. So a lot of those texts cover how to manipulate patterns before they're cut and sewn into a garment, or lack information on knits and performance fabrics. So, in a nutshell, it's like my little soapbox way of helping the environment and the people who are involved in the apparel industry, which is all of us.
Before we really get into the gist of your book and go into more details about it, can you just give us the information we need to know about the manufacturing process?
Absolutely. I love teaching this. One of my favorite classes to teach is textiles. So I'll give you just like a mini textiles lesson. It's sort of shocking to hear. One of my colleagues, the amazing Dr. Lori Wall, was hearing from her students that one of her online courses, the students think that robots make clothing, which is not true. We certainly have machinery that can do things like seamlessly knitting a sweater or laser etching and cutting denim to distress jeans instead of like sandblasting or something like that, or adding a print design to a t-shirt, but humans are really involved in the process. And if we're just thinking about the creation of the actual fabric, the textile, there are 5 stages. So it starts with fiber and how we grow, harvest, collect, manufacture fiber, which can come from natural sources. It can be semi-synthetic, which will be our rayons that come from wood pulp, or it can be synthetic. So first we've got fiber. Next we have that fiber and we figure out how to spin it or extrude it into a yarn. And then after we have that yarn, we can then move it into the stage of creating the actual structure of the fabric, which we typically do via knitting or weaving. So that's the 3rd step. After the fabric structure has been made, we can dye or print on the fabric. The dyeing can happen at any point, which is really exciting. So you could dye the fiber, you could dye the yarn, you could dye the fabric, you could dye or bleach something after it's been made. So really that happens anytime, but the printing process has to be done after the fabric has been made into a structure. And then after we have that dyeing and printing phase, we have the final and 5th phase, which is the finishing phase. And that's where we can add really cool properties to the fabric, like water repellency or fire retardants or calendaring, which can add luster or texture to the fabric. So I'm going to do a little exercise with you. Is that okay?
That's totally okay.
Great. And I hope the listeners will do it too. So if you have a garment next to you or on you, which might be kind of difficult to get at really fast, I want you to do a couple of things with it. The reason for this exercise, and I do this with my students, is to help create a better understanding of just how respectful and like amazed we should be of the cloth that's on our backs on a daily basis. So the first thing that I want you to do is see if you can find your garment tag. This often will be on the center back of your garment, but it might also be on a side seam. And then if you can see what the fiber content is of one of those garments. So if it says 100% cotton, right, you know that comes from a plant. Can you tell what yours says?
Okay, so I have a dress here, and I'm looking for the tag. Here we go. All right, it says 100% rayon.
Awesome. So do you know what rayon is?
I have no idea.
Awesome. So rayon would be categorized under semi-synthetic, which means that it comes from a natural source, but it requires a lot of chemistry and changes to the fiber in order for it to actually be turned into a yarn. And so rayon can be made from eucalyptus or bamboo or lots of different bark. And so that's the first step. You didn't know what your garment was made out of, and now you do. And so again, natural fibers are going to be things like cotton, silk, wool, linen, hemp. And then semi-synthetics are going to be all the rayons that I just mentioned. And then synthetic fabrics typically come from petroleum-based products, so crude oil products. And those include things like polyester and acrylic. And so that's sort of my first tip there, is that it's really helpful to know what your fabrics are made out of. Now, I want you to look and feel your dress, or for the listeners, whatever it is that they're looking at. I want you to notice what it looks like and sort of if it's stretchy or not. Is your dress stretchy?
Not very. It's got this bit on the back that's sort of stretchy, but it doesn't have much give. No.
Yeah. Okay. So likely if your garment doesn't have stretch, this isn't always the case, but likely it's going to be a woven. So there are two main types of structures that we have when we're making a fabric, and one is a knit. And knits are created often with a single strand of yarn, but it can be multiple strands of yarn. And we can do this by hand or on a machine. And if you look really close at a knit garment, you might see these teeny tiny V's or hearts on one side. That's the knit structure. And then on the other side, you might see these little C's or waves. And those are purl stitches. And so we create knits on a knitting machine, and most knits are stretchy, but not all of them. So if you're wearing a stretchy t-shirt today, it's probably a knit. Now, you just said that it's not very stretchy. So if that's the case, you probably have a woven fabric. Listeners might be wearing a pair of jeans, for example. And if you look down at your jeans, you might notice that there are diagonal lines or a gridded pattern where there's a really clear horizontal and vertical pattern to the weave. And we can tell that things are woven because they have those two directional yarns. There's something called the warp yarn that goes up and down, and the weft yarn that goes weft to right or left to right. And that's one way that we can create woven fabric. So I think that you have a rayon dress that is woven, and there's probably some elastic or elastine in it. Do you think that sounds accurate?
That sounds absolutely correct. So yeah, that explains a lot.
Awesome. Cool. So now that we did that little bit of detective work, we can start to dive in a little bit deeper. We can think about how fabrics are dyed or printed upon. And then they're sewn, they have buttons, they have thread. We're cut out of fabric and made into a pattern. And a lot of that fabric that was cut out ends up on the ground and then eventually in a landfill. And your dress might end up there too. So one of the points that I'm trying to get across in my teaching in my book is that fast fashion has really changed people's perspectives on how they value apparel. And I think the first step to textile sustainability is being able to identify processes and steps in the textile and apparel industry that increase your understanding of something you interact with every day of your life.
So now we know the basics. Now let's get into what should you look for when you're trying to build a sustainable wardrobe?
Awesome question. So I think it's really important to think about circularity. So this is a model that we see in a lot of design fields, and it's also called the cradle to cradle model or the cradle to grave model. What it does is it makes you think about what you're consuming or what you're designing or what you're wearing from its inception to the end of life. So it's a lot to think about, but I'm just going to throw out some ideas that you and the listeners can start to think about. So first, you can consider how and where the garments were made. You're more likely to take better care of something that has ethical or emotional value to you than a quick fast fashion fix, right? People will spend a whole bunch of money on a car. First of all, because you kind of have to, cars are expensive, but also they want them to last for a really long time. Whereas because garments are often or can be a lower price item, they think, okay, it's $5, no problem, I'll just wear that. But if you actually think about it and start to value clothing a little bit more heavily than as just a one-off disposable thing, that's a really great way to start out by having a sustainable wardrobe. Also, only get things that you're really in love with. You know how you go to a store and you see something and you're like, I think that will look okay. If I have that feeling, I go, nope, I want to be in love with it, fall in love with it. Have that full body yes when you see that garment on the hanger or on your body, and try not to buy things that you think you maybe will like. Try to find things that you really will love. And then this is also where alterations come into play beautifully. So alterations, we can make things longer or shorter. We can make things wider or more narrow, right? And if you have something that you love but it doesn't quite fit right, you can take it in to get altered, or you can alter it yourself. If you feel great in that garment, you're going to wear it and keep it for a lot longer. And that's much more sustainable, right? You can also wear fibers that feel really good on your skin. For example, I'm a little bit of a fiber snob, and if I see something, first I kind of look at the cut and the color and the print. I'm like, oh, that looks pretty cool. And then I immediately go to that tag. And if it's 100% polyester, I know I'm not going to want that because it bothers my skin. I try to kind of stay away from that because polyester doesn't degrade in landfills, right? Natural fibers do. And while you can recycle polyester, it's plastic. So it can be melted back and extruded out into a fiber again. And it's really great that we can do that. Those microplastics shed every time we put them into the washing machine. So that's another aspect of sustainability that I really focus on, is thinking about the fiber content. And I also really love to consider what will happen to my garment at the end of its life. Can I patch it? Can I repair it? Does it have seam allowance, which is the distance between the stitch and the raw or finished edge of a garment? If there's some extra seam allowance in there, which you'll see in things like prom dresses, wedding dresses, formal wear, then I can make them bigger. And you can always make something smaller. But I also like to consider whether it can be recycled, whether it's biodegradable. And so that's a lot to think about. But those are some of the ways that you can start to think about a sustainable wardrobe.
Okay, so the dress that I'm holding right now is a good example of this. I love this dress. It was probably $15.
Yeah.
But it is one of my favorite things I own, and it has a stain on it. Is it worth trying to fix it? Is it worth trying to do something with your cheap garments?
Absolutely. If you love something and you want to wear it, it is always helpful and useful to fix clothing that you have. And you can be really creative with it, right? With the stain, there are so many different stain solutions. Although if you heat it, if you have it in a hot washer and then you dry it in a hot dryer or you iron it, that is how we set dye and prints and those sort of things. So you might have set it. But there are still lots of other creative things that you can do. For example, you could dye the whole thing. You could get a thing of dye and you could treat your fabric and put it in there and cover up the stain. Or you could do a little bit of visible mending, or you could put a patch in there. Or you could just say, you know what, this is well loved. I have a stain and I'm just going to let it be there. But if you love them and you want to wear them, I always suggest trying to keep them in your wardrobe.
Awesome. I will keep that in mind because I've been hanging on to this dress for a year since I got the stain on it. So
yes, we might have to look at it a little bit more closely sometime.
For complete newbies, people who haven't really done any sewing or mending, where's a good place to start? Obviously, YouTube, you can learn almost anything off YouTube, but where should people start with these kind of clothing repairs?
Okay, that is such a great question. So yeah, YouTube is amazing. I have a YouTube channel, Chelsey with a YCHELSEY, Bird with a Y. I've got lots of suggestions on there, and then all sorts of, folks who are films and influencers on there. You can also look at my book, but besides and beyond that, I always suggest starting with hand sewing. If you're going to be thinking about repairs or alterations, a sewing machine can be a very beautiful thing, and it can also be the reason why you're pulling your hair out. And a lot can happen with a sewing machine, but I would start with something super small, like sewing on a button, finding a video on just how to sew on a button, or some just basic hand sewing stitches. Like the back stitch is the strongest hand stitch that you can do. If you're in the middle of the backwoods and you've ripped out the crotch seam of your favorite pair of pants and you really need them to stick together and you've got a little hand sewing needle and thread, you can do a back stitch to keep that seam together for a little while. So I suggest a lot of hand stitching. But for repairs and things like that, I think one of the most common repairs that needs to be done is with zippers, right? And I love zippers. My former business partner called me the zipper wizard. And so if you look on the back of your zipper head, a lot of times there will be some text. There might be a number, which is going to be the size of the zipper. And then there might also be some letters that will indicate whether it's a nylon coil zipper, a metal zipper, etc. But you can also just measure the distance between the teeth in millimeters, and that will tell you what size the zipper head is. And then you can order online that zipper head, and all you have to do is take off this little top stop off of like a jacket, for example, take off the old slider, slide the new slider on, and then you can do a little whip stitch on the top so that you've got a functioning zipper. Now, that's not always the case, but that's a really empowering thing to do if you have a zipper that's broken, is just learn how to put on a new zipper head.
Yeah, I actually have a tent that needs a new zipper, so I'm going to remember this conversation.
Yes, yes. And there are a few more steps when it's a tent, but it definitely can be done. Just one end of the zipper needs to be shorter than the other, and you're going to be solid.
So we've gone over the basics, what people should look for, but this is also, it's a bit of a lifestyle change.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some practical tips for people to get in the habit of having a sustainable wardrobe?
Absolutely. So first thing that I kind of mentioned already is plan ahead and purchase lifelong garments. This is probably the biggest change because we're procrastinators. All of us are, right? And so we think, okay, I have this event. I'll just get it a couple days before. And then, but it actually needs alterations or something. But if you can start to plan ahead just a little and think about something that you would like to wear for a long time, that's a really good place to start. And then quality over quantity. We give this assignment to our students to think about cost per wear. So if you spend $10 on a shirt and you wear it 3 times, right? The cost per wear is $3.33, right? So it's not that much. However, if you spend $300 on a jacket that you love and you wear it every day for 3 years, then it costs you 27 cents per wear. So just kind of thinking about the long game. Quality over quantity. Renting garments is also something that people can start to think about a little bit. I was recently in Europe, and Amsterdam's a really beautiful place that's leading the way for a lot of textile sustainability and sustainability in general in the Netherlands. And they have something called a fashion library. And it's a store where you can go in and just like you can check out a book, you can check out a garment. There are also companies like Rent the Runway, which I've never used before. Some other tips for a sustainable wardrobe are to avoid fads. I always give the example of the cold shoulder shirt, which many people loved, and I'm so happy for them. And I'm not being judgmental, but it was definitely not my cup of tea. It's the shirt where there's an opening in the shoulder, right? That's something that's going to go out of style quickly. And so if you can avoid fads and think about classic looks, that's a really great way to have a sustainable wardrobe. Having, a black suit is really awesome, or the little black dress, whatever that means for you. Something that you can wear at business events, wedding, funeral, that kind of a thing. One of my favorite things to do is host clothing swaps. We have a wonderful sustainable clothing swap with the Apparel Textile and Design Club on campus once a year. And that's such a beautiful way to try some styles out and some new clothing without having to spend any money or contribute to textile waste, because we're just recycling. Thrifting has its ups and downs, right? There's a dark side to thrifting as well, but it can be really wonderful. And those garments already exist, right? So we want to just keep them. We want to keep them. You can upcycle, you can recycle, but obviously my favorite practical tip of where to start is if you find something and it's just not quite right, get it altered. Spend a few bucks. And sometimes people have a hard time with this because the alteration costs more than the garment. But then you have to think, was it actually possible for this pair of jeans to be $15 when the cost per yard of denim could be $15 a yard? And a whole bunch of people went into manufacturing, cutting, sewing, distressing, merchandising, getting into the retail, shipping from another country. It's so much. So it's a big change in your thought process of how you consume and wear garments. But if you think about if something's alterable and if you would want to repair it, like you love it so much you want to repair it, or even just thinking about the companies that you're buying your garments from. If you think Patagonia is such a golden child example of transparency and sustainability, and they have the repair van that will go around. I would love to have that someday.
Of all that we've said today, what is the number one thing that you want people to take away from this conversation?
It's really overwhelming to try to pick a way in which you want to try to improve the planet or the way that you consume. And I often get really overwhelmed and bogged down with, oh my gosh, like, am I doing enough? It just kind of feels like everything's on fire. What can we do? And my suggestion is just to pick one small change that you would like to make in your choices as a consumer of textiles and try it out for a little bit. So maybe you go and get the pants that you love so much that are way too long and just get them hemmed so you'll actually wear them. Or maybe you take a moment to sew on a few loose buttons or mend a hole in your favorite pair of pants. And it could be terrible or it could be visible mending. But I think anything that I see that someone has attempted to try to fix is beautiful and interesting and awesome. A lot of people feel like they have to be perfectionists, and you really don't. Maybe you decide to cast your vote, because every time you purchase something, right, you are casting a vote on how and where you spend your money. And maybe this time spend a few extra dollars on something that's from a more transparent or ethical company, or supports the labor and natural resources that go into your apparel, or just something that you know you really are going to love and take care of. We cannot do it all, but if we can take small steps toward a more sustainable wardrobe, I don't know, something magical might happen.
Yeah, I might get my favorite dress back.
I think you're going to. I really do.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. This has been very informative and very fun.
Oh, it was a delight. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so what did you think of the interview?
Oh, it was fun. So much of the things we do in life are just, you're not consciously making thoughtful decisions about them. And I just like the fact that she wants us to stop and think about how we spend our money on clothes and how we care for our clothes. So just the simple act of reminding us that that's a way that we impact the world on multiple levels, economically, sustainably, all those things, is a wonderful reminder. I do think fast fashion puts us in a headspace of wastefulness to a certain extent, because the designers and sellers of those clothes aren't putting care and time into those products. They're not making them well. So it doesn't put us in a headspace of making sure that they're treated well. But on the flip side, it's allowing people who wouldn't be able to afford suits and things for maybe a job interview that, now they're able to afford those types of items that would potentially be out of their price range. So, I think there are several sides to it.
I think Chelsey's biggest takeaway is just to do what you can. If you have to buy less expensive clothes because you can't afford anything nicer or more well-made, that's okay. Just make a conscious decision about it and try to keep it nice. And if you can fix it without throwing it into the trash. Because, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think it's complicated. I know Chelsey also knows that it's complicated. But I have good news.
Yeah?
That dress that I was talking to Chelsey about in the interview, we discussed afterwards. That dress has a dirt stain on it that I did not notice it had, and then I threw it into the wash and the stain set. And I asked her if there was anything I could do to help this dress. It's mostly white and it's got little light blue stripes on it. She told me to take a watercolor pen where you put water in the end and put some diluted bleach in there, and then basically just paint the dress on the white bits. And now it's not perfect. It's not like off the rack perfect, but it's wearable again. And I'm so excited because I love that dress.
I am so happy to hear that. You have elongated its life.
We talked to a lot of interesting people on this podcast, but this is the one that actually changed my life. Thank you so much for listening to the Vandal Theory. You can visit our website at uidaho.edu/Vandal Theory for more episodes and to learn more about our research. Email us at vandaltheory@uidaho.edu. We are on all of the podcasting platforms, so please rate, review, and subscribe. I'm Danae Lenz.
And I'm Lee Cooper.
Thanks for joining us.